Grateful good morning to our Caron YouTube audience, and also to those of you who are in person with us, and those of you who are watching on the live stream. It's the 24th of July, 2022, for anybody watching at a later date. And as I was preparing for the message for this week, I was reminded of when I began my recovery and a challenge that I faced. So it was a long time ago. I'm grateful to say it's been a long time since I've had a drink or a drug, intentionally for the sort of purpose of checking out. And but early on, I had had this terrible period of inability to stop and even dial back or control my using, and I found myself in that early awakening that is part of what Caron helps facilitate for so many people. And I was completely unfamiliar with what a journey of sobriety and abstinence recovery would involve. And I knew why I was here. I knew why I was what I was seeking. A little disclaimer here. I've realized that when I speak at Caron, you may be here as a patient or a family member of a loved one for whom alcohol is not the issue. And it could be another substance, or it could even be gambling, sex, or another process addiction. But for purposes of simplification, I'm just going to talk about alcohol and alcoholism. Even for myself, that's an oversimplification, but it makes it easier for me to sort of move into the message of the speech. So, when I say alcohol or alcoholic, please translate to the substance of or behavior or concern that applies in your situation. So my point there, to get back on my little track here, was when I found myself in recovery, my focus was stopping drinking. And so it was peculiar to me when I arrived in rooms where there were these placards on the wall. They, at first I thought they were all rolled up parchments because I had this cynical sort of anti-religious judgment stuff going on. I identified as an atheist when I began my recovery, and I wasn't interested in any scrolls. And so there were these 2 scrolls on the walls of the rooms I was largely going to, which had 12 steps and 12 traditions. And those of you who are members of those communities, as I continue to be, know that's really common. When you go to an AA or any 12-step oriented meeting, it's really common to see these. And here in the Caron Auditorium, we do have the 12 steps on a placard. And at one time, we used to have the 12 traditions also over there, but recently we flipped those and put Father Bill's portrait up instead. Anyway, when I was looking at the 12 steps with suspicion, because they were on a scroll, and I was thinking about them in relation to the purpose for which I had arrived, I thought, what? Because alcohol is only mentioned at the very beginning. And the remaining steps, to me, it seemed irrelevant to the point of what I was here for. I didn't see how, like at one point it says something about a fearless and searching moral inventory. And I was like, wah, wah. Like, it sounded like the Peanuts teacher to me. It didn't mean a thing to me. Plus I was like, no, and no thank you, that's not why I'm here. Even making direct amends, like, why? And then it said prayer and meditation. I was like, dude, I don't do that stuff. And so I had a bunch of points of difference with the explicit invitations that were on that sort of roster of choices. And it had to do with my singular focus on what I thought I had come here for. And what I'd like to claim is that most Caron patients could be located on a continuum where there is an in-between maybe, but there's an extreme of I'm just here to stop X, Y, Z. And maybe even I don't even want to. I've been leveraged, I've been forced, or whatever, and my spouse or my job or my family or my, or the law wants me to stop, and you people say you can help me stop. And then there are people who are in the other extreme. They're like, this is the narrative, oh my God, I don't understand what's come of me and how my life has gotten me to this place. And I try not to cuss at chapel, but my whole life is a blank show. I'm just in a total state of disaster. And anything you can do to help me with any of this mess, that's the other extreme. Is either help me with just this one thing or kind of help me with everything, right? And the middle would be like, well, maybe this and this are involved, but not that. So there are people who are in for a wholesale change, and there are people who are here for incremental change and singular, or there are people who are here for, I'm going to use a couple different words. I want to call it transformational change, or quantum change is a term. As a clinician here, one of the things I've been blessed to do is to study change. And I would say, in fact, when I went to seminary, that was already an education in change of a different sort. But eventually, along my sober education, I have really been confronted with a variety of models of transformation. And it's made me think of myself as a bit of a theory of change person. And one of my gurus, go-to people in the theories of change corner, is a guy named Bill Miller. Now, William Miller is tremendously important if there's anybody in the room who works at Caron, because we all study Bill Miller and a thing that's called motivational interviewing. One of the other parts of our audience here are medical professionals, and some of our medical professionals in the United States learn what Bill Miller's work was, which is called, in the medical world, motivational enhancement. But whether you learn motivational interviewing or motivational enhancement, you're learning Bill Miller techniques to help people awaken to a desire to change themselves, which is way better than in the parental child model. You have to do this. Does not actually turn out to work very well. So many people, in fact, become defensive, shocking, when they're told they must change. But the Jedi master trick of a clinician is to figure out how to help a person identify goals which will require change, and then help them connect the dots. Like, oh, I want a better life, or I want to fix my family relationships, or I want to move this way in my career. And then the key question is, well, how's the drinking doing with helping you with that? Well, not at all. So then now we're on a path where the patient has an identified goal, and the goal that they came here for is a subsidiary goal. And so, I'm off track. Bill Miller teaches about change, and I've learned a lot from Bill Miller about change, but interestingly, as a guru of change, one of the things that he also did was he published a book after he became like the guru of motivational enhancement, was he published a book on quantum change. Because what he thought about was that his method was great for helping people make like progressive changes, but that in his work with people who suffer from addiction, he had frequently seen what I'm going to call the Scrooge Grinch thing. Which I think as soon as I say that, you sort of know what I mean. Like, his heart grew 3 sizes that day. Or, and this is a thing that does manifest in human circles, is that sometimes people, as a young boy, I kind of believed the old adage that a leopard doesn't change its spots, and that applied generally in all circumstances. I just thought if you were a jerk, you're going to stay a jerk. If you were nice, you'd stay nice. And I thought about people in a very binary way like that, like nice jerk, nice jerk. I'm not pointing at anybody, but today I've realized that there's a lot more complexity, and that the leopard adage may apply in certain areas of human beings, but then in other cases, people do dramatically change. I have many people that knew me years and years ago who, encountering me today, are like, wow, what happened in your life, Jack, that you went from being jerk to being less of a jerk? And there may be some patients who would disagree, but it's okay. So this is the subject for today, is transformational change. And a secondary point I'd like to make is that it is my belief that this is an incredibly important subject here, because it is my belief that if you are a patient or a family member and you set your sights on the incremental and individual change, your outcomes will be less long-term. So just stopping drinking is, I've come to believe, not enough to sustain an abstinence trajectory long term. And I've actually come to believe that the person who gets to the point where they earn their seat here have fallen into this place where they have a robustly expressed addictive disorder, not just by the alcohol alone. There's like antecedent, previous crap that precipitates in this thing. And that could be trauma, it could be grief, it could be unhealthy relationships, it could be just wear and tear of a really difficult life. It could be messy childhood stuff. But in almost every case of people that I've worked with, when you peel back drinking is a problem thing, you find that there's more to the story. So just stopping drinking leaves, the old AA expression, which I thought was so great when I first heard it, is, if you take the rum out of the fruitcake, what do you have? Fruitcake. And that this is why the incremental thing doesn't really address the fruitcake level concern. And imagine dry fruitcake, right? So instead of putting rum on it, we have to figure out something else to do. We have to transform the fruitcake into a different sort of entity in its essential nature and way of being. So first of all, is it possible? How do we make ourselves predisposed to experience the metamorphosis, the caterpillar? The caterpillar is a good illustration I hadn't thought about, but the caterpillar goes through a cocoon phase and then emerges as a butterfly, right? And so the chrysalis stage is what was the other thing I wanted to make sure I talked about, and I'm going to watch our time to make sure I have time for sharing as well. But this metamorphosis mystery, when studied either from a theological perspective or from a behavioral change perspective, turns out to have certain things that you can say about it. So, first of all, even though you'd like to think it just happens instantly and that Scrooge's flip is instantaneous or that the Grinch's flip is instantaneous, in fact, there's a pre-story and a post-story to the thing, right? But there is a moment of conversion, of transformation, that is fairly marked and profound. And there is definitely a before and after. So there are people who can look at the person having known them before and after and say, I see a substantive, qualitative, comprehensive kind of differential. So what I think is relevant to this moment, as I have the privilege of standing here, is the chrysalis phase. Because I like another one of my phrases for that is the messy middle. And I think even though the messy middle can be shorter for some people and longer for some others, it's actually there. And there's another theorist I'll bring to the table. One of the places I studied as I moved along I became addicted to grad school actually in my sobriety. And I've accumulated a bunch of sheepskins saying I was afraid of scrolls, but there it is. So I had the privilege eventually of ending up in a doctoral program in a Catholic institution where I studied ritual. And I was encouraged to read a 20th century anthropologist, a guy named Victor Turner. I guess it's not too many Victor Turner devotees in the room. But Victor Turner's expertise, he was a real life, what was the guy's name? Robert Langdon. Do any of you know who that is? That's a Dan Brown novels. What was the first novel?
Angels and Demons.
Da Vinci Code.
Da Vinci Code, that's the one. Da Vinci Code, and then Angels and Demons, and then
Angels and Demons was first.
Oh yeah, I think it's earlier. Thank you. But the Da Vinci Code is what made Dan Brown famous, and he has this lead character who is a symbologist, right? He's an expert in symbol. Well, Victor Turner was an expert in human ritual and symbol in real life. And Victor Turner studied rites of passage in ritual communities. And one of the things he developed was a theory of rites of passage, and one of the things he noticed was about the middle. And that the middle was, he coined, I don't think he coined the expression, but he used an expression which is the adjective limbic. And I don't know if any of you have ever heard that, but limbic phenomenon, we talk about the limbic brain. So limbic phenomenon are threshold, liminal, I'm sorry, I'm using limbic, but liminal is the adjective I should be using. He talked about liminal experience, and that when you enter a ritual process, you cross a threshold into the liminal world, and then eventually you merge out of the chrysalis on the other side of it, like breaking through the barrier, and you're like, yeah, you can fly. So, what I'm saying is that treatment and early recovery is that. It's an entrance into a liminal experience. It's also an entrance into a limbic experience. That's really funny. That was my Freudian brain at work. So, because the reason why it's liminal is it's also very emotional. It's difficult to read. When you take away the alcohol from the alcoholic, they are, this is AA language, restless, irritable, and discontented in the early. The natural state of an alcoholic without alcohol is uncomfortable. And when you enter the world of early recovery, it's disorienting. And that was one of the characteristics of liminal experience, was that there's a natural disorientation. You're like, what is this place, Caron? What is a 12-step meeting? Why am I in a church basement? Why, the person leading the meeting seems like a dirtball. Like, who put them in charge? It's like often how one feels. Well, it turns out there's no one who puts anybody in charge. It's just like you sign up, and it's a weird world in which this very much fits the Victor Turner description. Authority takes on a new configuration from the authority structures that you knew in the previous work. And now the person with the most time in the room is the person with the authority, rather than the police officer or the judge or the doctor or the lawyer. And in fact, the doctor or the lawyer or the police officer or the judge may be coming in as a novice, asking I don't mean to disparage janitors, but it's sort of like the hierarchy of our social structures at the moment, asking the janitor how to stay sober. So there's an inversion of roles, there's a weirdness to the recovery world, and there's a terrible discomfort about it. It's like, ah! Because it's a little bit, there's a nakedness about feeling like we've lost our defense mechanisms, our protections. And there's some emerging awareness that what's being asked of you is way more than just stopping drinking. It's like, oh no, I just came here to stop drinking, and you're talking about like a complete change of my entire way of going about life. Yeah, we sort of are. And having hopefully spooked a few of you about that, I have one little piece of good news, which is that this is well-trodden turf. You are not the first person to find yourself in disorientation and in a sense of loss where your previous sort of comfortable reality has been stripped away, not just the alcohol taken from it, but the whole sense of familiarity. And you may be hearing about like sober living or extended care or IOP or My Recovery Connection, or all these different ways that you're going to be continuing to need sort of handholds as you go forward, because this is really learning a new language. It's really coming about into a new sort of phase of your existence. And before you can just fledge the nest, it may take a little bit of flying lessons. And when one experiences a sense of being lost, today we have this great advantage geographically, almost wherever you are, as long as there's a cell tower nearby, you can pull out your smart device, and your smart device will figure out where you are, and when you tell it where you want to go, it will tell you how to get there, right? So those of you who are as old as I am may remember when you had paper maps, and you had to like pull out the map and go to the next intersection and see where you were, and then sort of figure it out. And some of us have much better map abilities than others. I'm picking on my wife here, but you don't know that. But it's just hilarious how much, we'll come out of the same hotel room and she'll be, which way is the elevator? But I'm like, the elevator is that way. And So, a sense of direction, right? Can I find a sense of direction in the disorientation of my early sobriety? Yes. The scroll on the wall is a treasure map for the path forward, in which the very first step is the entrance into the chrysalis experience. And that's why it includes education about the past and orientation towards the future. That's why it touches into all areas about fearless and searching, so a comprehensive. That's why it can talk about morality. It's why it can talk about repair of relationships. It's why it can encourage a hygiene, a practice of prayer and meditation, sort of to keep you on the future path. All of the pieces of that 12-step map. And not only that, so recovery dharma and smart recovery are two really, really key options for the recovering journeyer. And both of those also are comprehensive in their approach. So I'm not aware of any recovery path that is like, come here to be with us, because all we'll talk to you about is alcohol, alcohol, alcohol. So these other paths encounter the same reality, which is that when you take the alcohol away from the alcoholic, you find an unstable disequilibrium. And that helping persons move towards a new equilibrium. In smart recovery, you talk about their fourth pillar is life balance, regaining life balance without the alcohol in the mix. In recovery dharma, you talk about an eightfold path that becomes a way of life. In the 12 steps, you talk about a 12-step journey becomes a way of life. And so this is the invitation of today. And I have always on the table a shofar. I can't ring it, I especially can't ring it with a mask, but that's sort of what they sound like. It's a ram's horn that's used in Jewish festival celebrations. But the sound of the horn that I ring today is to invite you upon a transformational journey. Not just for the patient, but for the family. And our alumni who are here know a little bit what I'm talking about because they've been on it for a while. So, if you just came here for just a little thing, sorry. I do have some empathy for that, like that's all I came for, but I will say my life is much better today for the comprehensiveness of the change on which I have been forced to embark. So I hope you will allow yourselves to be caught up in the sweep of it and landed on a new shore in another day in which you can look back and go, wow, so much of who I was